everybody. This is Murray Carter from Carter Cutlery. Recently, we put out on social media that we were going to do a Q&A session. We invited people to send in questions. There are two kinds of questions. We've got questions that are knife making, bladesmithing related, and then we have other questions about personal life, how we run our business, what size socks I wear, etc. So today we're just going to we're going to start answering some of the bladesmithing, knife making questions. We probably aren't going to get through them all because you guys sent in a whole lot of questions, but we'll give it around 8 minutes, and then as necessary we'll have part 2, part 3, etc. First of all, I'd like to give a call out to my friends in Nova Scotia, the Atlantic Woodworkers Association, as well as my friends from Franklin County High School in Brookville, Indiana. Thank you, both of you, for your interest in Carter Cutlery and for sending in some questions. First, we're going to go through some questions from Brookville, Indiana. About how much money does it take to start up and get tools to start up bladesmithing? Well, there's a lot of people who have started bladesmithing with tools that they already have in their garage. In fact, there's a book out there called The $50 Knife Shop by Wayne Goddard, who's a fellow ABS master smith. And if you're looking to forge your first knife on the cheap, he's outlined exactly how to do it. The typical model is bladesmiths start purchasing tools as they make knives and sell them. So actually you can kind of finance your own growth without either needing a large capital investment or having to take a loan from the bank. What's the best kind of steel to use? Well, there's literally hundreds of different kinds of steel out there, and if you're serious about bladesmithing, I don't recommend you use the cheapest. I recommend you use a good, clean steel that is fairly available to you, and it doesn't matter what kind of steel it is as much as it matters that you make batch after batch after batch of knives with that steel and learn the intricacies of that steel. Learn what temperatures it likes to be forged at. Learn where the limit is in terms of forging at lower temperatures. Learn if you're going to forge weld with it, learn what temperatures it likes to be forged welded at. And more importantly, learn exactly how to quench it and temper it in such a way that you get the best metallurgical possibility out of that steel. So, grab any commonly available, fairly low alloy steel like 1084, 1095, 01 tool steel. Of course, I use the Hitachi steels. But it doesn't matter what the steel is as much as it matters your passion, dedication, and devotion. Keep in mind that when you put steel in a forge, what you end up with at the end of the process is about 40% raw material and about 60% influenced by skill and dedication. So you can fundamentally change the properties of the steel by how you work it in the forge. What is life like in the shop? Well, David Boy wrote a book back in the early 80s, maybe it was even the late 70s, called Step-by-Step Knife Making. And if anybody's interested in becoming a full-time bladesmith, that's definitely a book that you need in your library, Step-by-Step Knife Making. And he said in his book, the first knife he ever made sure was a whole lot of hard work. And every knife after that was still a whole lot of hard work. So the answer to your question is, life in the knife shop is a whole lot of hard work. That being said, we get to fashion and create things with our hands. Bob Loveless, famous Knife Makers Guild knife maker from the 80s, he said it best when he said, doesn't matter what kind of joy you pursue in life, nothing is like the satisfaction that comes from having created something useful with your hands. So while bladesmithing is a whole lot of hard work, it is eminently satisfying at the end of the day. I sleep well knowing I've put in a good day's work. Is forge welding hard? This harkens back to the idea that it doesn't matter what steel you use so long as you become intimately familiar with it. Yes, forge welding is hard in the bladesmithing world in particular, because we're trying to join two dissimilar metals at the lowest possible temperature and yet get a perfect weld. The problem is anybody can heat the steel up way hotter than you might want to and ensure a good forge weld, like a blistering, bright yellow heat, for example. The problem is with knives is that leads to excessive grain growth in the steel, and while you'll get a perfect forge weld, you won't end up with a blade that'll have a high performance because you've kind of damaged the metallurgical properties of the steel. Okay, those were questions from our friends in Franklin County High School. Now, on to some questions from the internet. Your knives are used from Arctic to hot deserts. What is, in your opinion, the best handle material for a knife? Well, I certainly don't like to have metal handles because they would be cold, and we don't like stone handles again because they're cold and so on. I think there's no mystery as to the fact that almost all handles for all tools historically have been made out of wood. Wood is soft to the touch, it's warm to the touch, it kind of breaks in over the years of use. A wooden handle will kind of wear away in the high spots and become more in tune with your hand. It kind of wears in, becomes familiar, and it's durable, and if it drops, it's not going to break or chip. So it's hard to beat a wood handle, although if you're looking for something that's bomb-proof, that's going to survive, you know, some incredibly testing scenario in the future, then something man-made like micarta or G10 or carbon fiber is not a bad alternative, but it does lack the warmth and natural beauty of wood. What do you think of W2 steel? Well, again, I actually don't have a lot of experience with W2, but it doesn't matter what the steel, you want to gain intimacy with the steel you choose, and don't flirt with all sorts of different steels, like stick to one steel until you master it. Of all the steps involved in knife making, which one did you have to work at the most to be good at? This is a great question. Of course, our goal in making knives is to make something that's metallurgically superior than to what you can buy in the store, something made in a factory. So coaxing the maximum metallurgical potential out of a given steel in terms of sharpness, edge holding, and ease of sharpening, that's really the most important challenge in bladesmithing to overcome. That being said, people want a blade to be aesthetically pleasing, so learning how to grind a blade in an aesthetic way, and also designing a blade and executing that design in such a way that people just are just dying to own that knife is kind of a secondary and also important challenge. But never put aesthetics over performance, always the performance. It's always the function over form. Can you get a hamon on a piece of Damascus? A hamon is a temper line, and it's where you quench a blade in such a way that the edge is hard, but behind the edge it's softer and the back is soft. And that's typically called a hamon in the blade smithing community. Personally, I don't quench my blades in that manner. I fully quench my blades so that the spine of the blade is just as hard as the cutting edge. And that gives the longest life in a blade because you can sharpen it up, you know, from a really wide blade all the way down to a little toothpick and the thing will still cut. So I'm sure you can get a hamon in Damascus. It depends on what steels you start off with. But myself personally, I fully quench my blades, so I don't ever try to get a hamon in any of my knives. What's a good brand of water stones? Well, again, we sell and we use king stones from Japan. We use a 1,000 grit and a 6,000 grit. And it doesn't really matter if that was an 800 and a 4,000 or a 600 and a 2,000 or a 1,200 and an 8,000. You just need a rough stone and a fine stone. And I outlined that whole system in my Blade Sharpening Fundamentals DVD, which if you don't have, you definitely need. But there again, it's like, don't be so fixated on a name brand stone. Get yourself a couple of stones, a rough one and a fine one, and master them. You know, sharpen 500 knives with the stones that you have at hand. before you feel like you need to upgrade to something else. Because really, this whole bladesmithing experience is, I like to say, 90% skill and only 10% tools. We're going to do one last question. What defines good construction for a tactical knife, such as the ones you make? So a tactical knife, first and foremost, has got to be a knife you've got with you if you ever plan to use it in a quote-unquote tactical or survival situation. So if it's too big, too heavy, you're not going to have it with you. Conversely, if a blade is too small, such that you really can't cut rope with it, string, you couldn't use it to defend yourself, you couldn't use it to prepare a meal, then that wouldn't really be tactical either. So you need a knife that is as large as you can comfortably carry, that has a handle that indexes fairly naturally, and that has great metallurgy and great edge geometry, so it cuts real well. Don't forget the fact that it needs to be easy to sharpen, and essentially you've got something similar to our FS1 combat knife. Okay, I think that's all the time we have for today. Again, I want to thank the Atlantic Woodworkers Association for their interest in what we do, as well as our friends at Franklin County High School in Brookville, Indiana. This is Murray Carter from Carter Cutlery saying, be sharp.